Hi, this is Esther Lin, photographer for MMAfighting.com, and here are some of my favorite images from the Invicta FC 11 and UFC 184 Double Fight Week. Fight Week actually began a week before at Glendale Fight Club with Ronda Rousey's media day. Here is Rousey listening to her coach Edmond Taverdian in the reporter's scrum. The official fight week began with an open workout at the UFC gym in Torrance for Invicta FC 11. In what used to be a spin class, UFC had set up a makeshift locker room for the fighters, and here is Alexa Grasso wrapping her hands. Grasso then worked out for the crowd, showing off her speed to fans whispering in awe of her skills. I love shooting toward the window, the bright light of day streaming into the cage around strawweight Grasso, a radiant, sprightly fighter. Grasso's Team Lobo gym mate, Irene Aldana, then entered the cage and continued to wow the crowd with her own demonstrations. Aldana, 2 weight classes above Grasso, exhibited her fluidity of motion for the gathered fans. Back in the holding room, Grasso watched a video of the open workout that had just transpired moments before on her phone. Then, Chris Cyborg Justino walks out and shakes the cage with her workout. All the camera phones are out now to capture the Invicta champ's intense display of strength as she heaves training partners around the cage. Cyborg then went around the cage meeting fans. Most smiled and asked for photos. One woman even cried. It was warm and lovely and sweet. Christiane then spoke to the media in an unexpectedly soft, cheerful voice. The Invicta fighters left and made way for the headliners of UFC 184. Title challenger Kat Zingano and former Invicta FC fighter hits pads here at the open workout. Then, the champ Rousey did her usual very lengthy workout, with many rounds of mitts that finished with throws. Here, I racked focus mid-throw from Rousey to the admirers, plastered along the chain-link fence, hoping to capture this moment too. Then Rousey began to cartwheel around the cage, and while it might have seemed like just some acrobatic fun, it certainly foreshadowed the coming weekend's bout. After the workout, Rousey signed autographs and even took pictures of herself for the fans. There were arms reaching in from every angle to garner the champ's attention. She then did her media interviews, and when Rousey finished, I asked her to show me her hand wraps, adorned with "The Best in the World," written by her coach Edmond. In the evening, myself and fellow photographer Scott Hirano took portraits of the fighters on the Invicta FC 11 card. I brought props, including my gloomy bear arms, and we got Mizuki Inoue to give a good roar for the camera. I tried to get in a few extra shots with women who'd fought for Invicta before, and was happy that Aldana had brought a really beautiful Mexican flag for her photo session. We then got the 2 Mexican phenoms to pose together as the end to our long day of shooting was finally nearing. The featherweight champion Chris Cyborg then posed with her belt, brightly smiling, not hinting at the weight cut she faced now that the photo shoots were complete. Only happy to be here at Fight Week, ready to do her job. The stacked week continued with UFC 184 Media Day, where even more cameras and microphones were pointed at the champ as the fighters were perched upon the stage. And as expected, the face-off was intense. These 2 competitors couldn't help but approach each other with a restrained aggression. Rousey and Zingano turned to face the crowd and lights. I then hightailed it to the Invicta weigh-ins, where I squealed over the Alexa Grasso vs Mizuki Inoue matchup. It was sure to be the best thing ever. Then the main event faced off. Cyborg confronted Tweet, likely about her choice of words and hyping the fight, and Tweet shrugged her off. The teeming ballroom erupted in anticipation of tomorrow's card. It's Friday, and weigh-ins always begin with site coordinator Bert Watson greeting the crowd and getting them pumped for the fighters approaching the scale. I'm saddened by the news of his departure from the UFC, as he was an integral part of Fight Week. Bert Watson wasn't just the wee rollin' guy. Watson was the first and last in each city where preparing everything from workouts to locker rooms and doing a lot more than people might think goes into making a big fight happen. A big event isn't just the fighters and fans, there's commission, camera people, coaches, and so many more folks. The people in operations make up the framework of an event. As we waited for the fighters to weigh in, fans lined up for photos with fighters in attendance. Here's Betche Correia posing with this great fan that I've seen at so many events. It always makes me smile to see her at a fight. Correia smiled and posed, even helping fans learn how to properly pronounce her name. Then all the fighters weighed in and faced off. And of course, because they're amazing, Rousey and Zingano both faced forward, powerful, commanding the crowd whose excitement in seeing the two women fight now swelled in a roar. Just a few hours later, it was fight night at the Shrine Expo Hall as Invicta FC 11 began with a crash. Aspen Ladd debuted against Ana Carolina Vidal, whose submission attempts were met with Ladd's tenacious fists. The ramp gave Invicta FC a great big show feel. Reminded me of shooting Japanese shows, especially getting to shoot eye level with the fights. Christine Stanley was impressive in her win over Laura Salazar, and it was neat to be only a foot from the action. In a battle of the unbeaten prospects, Jamie Moyle's slick transition game got her the win over JJ Aldrich. I appreciated how Moyle let the sleeping Aldrich down gently, waited until she crossed to the other side of the cage before celebrating. Moyle then leapt around in joy and finally settled down, telling the commissioner who came to inspect her, "Okay, I'm done, grinning from ear to ear." Even UFC boss Dana White came to watch Invicta. After a quick submission win, Mexican bantamweight Irene Aldana stood quietly along the cage, smiling to herself. Aldana certainly deserves to be pleased with her performance. And to continue the fun positivity that really characterizes Invicta shows, Deanna Bennett spent her winner's interview awkwardly caressing the commentator Laura Sanko and then giving her a slow, sweaty embrace. I always enjoy having Bennett's brand of silliness around. And then, the fight I was most excited for. Alexa Grasso makes her way down the ramp across flag-waving, cheering fans. In a strange, disarming moment, Grasso even looked over at me as I shot her during the announcements. Usually, fighters are very focused on the killer across from them, but Grasso was very relaxed and smiled right at me. But right out of the gate, Mizuki Inoue peppered the Mexican with her signature speedy striking, and already I knew this fight would be everything I hoped. And Alexa Grasso showed why she is undefeated, biting down on her mouthguard and returning fire with her own quickness and stunning agility. Both Grasso and Inoue fought as if they were the main event, rousing everyone, even bringing Dana White to his feet. It was incredibly fun. In the end, Inoue felt she hadn't done enough, despite fighting a wonderfully exciting bout. And across the cage in the red corner, Alexa Grasso smiled as her coaches iced her face. She'd been through the hardest fight of her life, and she looked delighted. Her little celebration here is so sweet, genuine, and adorable. And now, it was time. Christian Justino, better known as Cyborg, approached the cage. Inside, challenger Charmaine Tweet eyed Cyborg, no fear in her eyes, and the champ stared right back. They faced off in the center, and I ran out of the cage to get to my post. Despite her fearlessness, Tweet would not survive long in the fight, as Cyborg would do exactly as she wished and decimate the Canadian quickly. Blood began to stream down from Tweet's nose, and finally, after 46 seconds, it was over. Chris Cyborg climbed the cage, cheered with fans, then came back down to the canvas and prayed. And while I was taking that photo, my colleague Scott Hirano took this photo from the balcony. I remember getting up after this moment and realizing I'd been kneeling in little puddles of blood. Now, it was time to edit and send out photos and get ready for UFC 184 the next day. The next morning, UFC held their Welcome to the Show press conference to introduce the headliners for their coming season of fights. Funny enough, I didn't even notice all those Reebok logos in the lights until I was editing the pictures. It was quite clever subliminal messaging. When it came time for the face-offs, strawweight champ Carla Esparza and Joanna Jędrzejczyk had an electric face-off, with the Polish challenger flashing a ton of attitude, which is really quite fantastic. And then, as champ John Jones and Anthony Johnson faced off, Johnson grabbed Jones's neck and Jones pushed back, and the crowd went wild with flashbacks of the Jones-Cormier brawl. Then, the champ and challenger began to laugh, patting Dana White on the ribs to let him know it was all a joke. The worry on White's face was priceless. With the press conference complete, we packed up our gear and walked over to the Staples Center. It's fight night again. I spent UFC 184 in the press room. There were too many photographers vying for a spot along the cage, so I wasn't able to shoot. It feels like watching one of my favorite bands becoming famous, growing in popularity, and I recalled that happiness that something you love, other people are now going to see and love, and it was just this small personal thing before. While you're happy for the fame and fortune this brings your favorite band, you can't help but feeling a little sad that it's not yours anymore. I'm feeling left out on this historic night, this great weekend in women's MMA, but I'm just being selfish and possessive. I'm just an MMA photographer, but Ronda Rousey is bigger than MMA. She's a fighter in the grander sense of the word and in a wider world than here in this cage. And it made me happy, too, to think of women on this giant stage now. And almost 6 years ago was the first time women headlined a major television MMA card with Strikeforce on Showtime. I was able to take this photo that remains one of my absolute favorite images that I have ever shot. I feel incredibly proud to have been there that night and incredibly proud of where women in MMA are and are going. After the wildly precise, succinct 14-second main event, Rousey and Zingano came to the press room for the post-fight conference. While Rousey beamed, Zingano seemed to replay the fight over and over in her head, occasionally quietly lowering her head to the table. This end seems now inevitable for every challenger to Rousey's crown. Meanwhile, the champion answered questions, and every once in a while the UFC president would lean over and whisper something to Rousey that usually garnered a smile in return. Perhaps they were discussing the early pay-per-view projections, or he was trying to get her to reveal her forthcoming filming schedule. Maybe he's asking her how she pulled off a cartwheel with her face. The star in Rousey shining brightly after this stellar performance. Then Judo Jean LaBelle showed off his stopwatch in an interview with Ariel Helwani, noting that the fight was actually 12.8 seconds, not 14. Either way, it was a spectacular, superbly skilled finish. Some fighters who hoped to fight Rousey next were in the press room, but none would speak up to take that shine off the champ. Her performance was so unreal, so perfect, every bantamweight had to have thought to themselves, I need to get better if I am to face Rousey. That super focused, intimidating Ronda Rousey is now smiling. Job well done, the extensive training is over, the fight and all that goes with it is now complete. Rousey grinned and departed the press room for her customary post-fight plate of wings, friends and loved ones in tow. This is Esther Lin for MMAfighting.com, and thank you for watching.